Well, I came to LA the end of 71. Dina Bandhu and Akuti dropped me there. I used to visit temples. And I was in Santa Barbara, and they said, Prabhupada's going to come. And so they said, we're going to take you to the big temple. And I didn't want to go to LA. I just liked the countryside. And they said, oh, no, we're going to meet, Prabhupada's going to come. And it turned out that Prabhupada wasn't going to come for a couple of months, but they deposited me in LA. The first time Srila Prabhupada came to LA, and the first time I saw Srila Prabhupada, actually I saw his feet first, because he was coming, and I was helping in the temple room, and then there was, he's coming, and I hit the floor. And then actually I just saw these golden feet walking by me, and I went, it was like the feet of a master, and they were actually luminous. And I just remember meeting Prabhupada's feet and then looking up and seeing this giant. And Prabhupada was only a small man, but it was like I looked up and there was Srila Prabhupada and just walking like a nobleman, how Srila Prabhupada walked, and just with purpose and with grace. So that was the first day I met Srila Prabhupada. I didn't meet you, I met Srila Prabhupada's presence in this incarnation. Yeah. I was called to his association a few times. The first time, obviously, when I got initiated in 1972 on Nrsingadev's appearance day. And then he gave me the name Manjuali, Devi, dasi. And then he looked at me and he said, Gopi name. And then I just accepted him as my guru. And 3 months later, on Balaram's appearance day, they needed help in the kitchen. And I got a Brahmin initiation. And then I went up to Srila Prabhupada, and that was my first actually contact of speaking with Srila Prabhupada, going into his room to receive Gayatri Mantra and sitting right next to him. And the quality that Srila Prabhupada had at that moment in time, I believe, was patience, because I was so nervous. I was trying to do the Gayatri, and he looked at me and he said, not on the cracks. And I was just like shaking, and he went, no, and he went through with me a few times, the Gayatri Mantra and how you touch the thumb to the fingers. And then finally I got it. But it took me a few times to kind of just become present. And so the quality of Srila Prabhupada was patience in that moment. The next time, actually, I had association with Srila Prabhupada, and I have spoken about this before, and I hope I get all the facts right, but was when I got married. And this was in 1972. And I was a brahmachari. I had been in the ashram for 10 months. Though I had been in other ashrams, other temples, but that was, I was asked to get married, and I had 24 hours to make up my mind. And then 7 days later, I was getting married to Jayatirtha, who was the temple president at that time. Srila Prabhupada invited us to come to his rooms after the wedding ceremony. And the wedding ceremony was in the garden of Dayananda and Nandarani. And Dayananda was the priest. And this was one of the first times when Prabhupada was getting upset because devotees weren't following their vows. And they were getting married in front of the deity, and then they weren't following through. Somebody would leave or something would break. So Prabhupada said, no, you get married in the garden, and then you come and come to see me. So we made, So within 7 days, it was make a feast, make a kurta, make a bead bag, and garlands, do everything. And so we went to Srila Prabhupada's quarters. And at that time, Prabhupada was giving, it was the 1st of October, 1972. So on the 26th of October, Prabhupada in Los Angeles gave a lecture. And he was talking about his own marriage. And he was talking about that, you know, his father, he was some attraction to one particular woman, but his father chose the one that was a little less attractive because a beautiful wife was the enemy, right? And so anyway, so this was in the background. That was like 4 days before or something. And so anyway, we come to meet Srila Prabhupada in the garden in Los Angeles. And Prabhupada was sitting on his asana. And it was early afternoon. And so we come with a plate of prasad. And we're at the gateway of the doorway. And Srila Prabhupada looks up at me. And he looks at Jaitirtha, and then he looks at me. He said, "Oh, she is beautiful." I went, "Oh my God, I'm an enemy already." And then he smiled, this like oceanic smile, and just kind of winked, you know. And it was like he was just being a loving father, you know. And he was telling, and so he had us come and sit. And so we were just kind of, and I gave him the plate of prasad, and then we sat down, and we were just so far back, and he said, no, to come closer, come closer. And so it was like we were like bumping up against Srila Prabhupada, really right there. And he just was so full of affection, you know, and then and so fatherly. And so we sat there, and so he took his drink. And, you know, the prasadam was there. He just took the drink because he had taken, and he lifted his hand, you know, like he would with the drink. And then he savored it, and then he closed it, and he lifted it again. He looked over at Jaitirtha and said, "And she can cook." I went, "Phew, at least I can do something." No, by your grace, Srila Prabhupada. And then he asked so lovingly, "So what do your parents think of this Krishna consciousness, you know?" And it was just like a funny story, because I rang my mother a couple of days before the wedding and said, "Oh, by the way, Mom, I'm getting married on Saturday." And she said, "Can I come?" In Chicago she was. So we got her a ticket, and she came, but she didn't come into the garden with Prabhupada, but she was the only lady in the wedding who sat on a chair, you know, everyone, because it was all devotees, you know. So Jaitirtha's parents had come. Anyway, I told Srila Prabhupada that my mother was very favorable and respectful, and that when she washed her dishes, she used to chant Hare Krishna. You know, she was a Catholic, but she did that. And then I presented Prabhupada. My mother had given me a check for my wedding for $50. And so I presented Prabhupada with my dowry, my check, you know, which came back to me years later. My mother saved it with his signature on the back of it from the 1st of October, 72. AC, paid to the account of A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami. It was really, really. So the qualities of Srila Prabhupada from that moment in time: loving father, humor, personal, and a sense of humor, you know, really. And then he spoke to me because he knew that I only asked Jaitirtha, you know, I never spoke to him except for, you know, what color are the deities wearing tomorrow? I mean, we never had a conversation. And Prabhupada looked at me thinking, oh my God, you know, this is India, you know, because they get married without seeing. And he looked at me and he said, affection comes through service. If Krishna is in the center, your marriage will be successful.
That was in the garden.
Yeah.
At the same time.
Yeah. When we were sitting at his feet, he looked at me and he just said, yes. He could tell, You know, that this was a big surrender, wasn't it? Like sitting on this chair today, you know, a big surrender. No, but it was so loving, and I can still see his smile and his, and still feel his affection and receive his blessing, really, because he, you know, he blessed us. And he could see what the journey ahead would be. I had no clue, but I knew it would be good for my spiritual life. And that was Srila Prabhupada's gift. Okay, the scene is 1976, Bhaktivedanta Manor, Srila Prabhupada's bedroom. George Harrison visiting. We were called up, Prabhupada called up, because he wanted prasadam for George. And he asked me to make samosas for George. I used to do that when George used to come. And he also wanted us to serve George lunch in his bedroom, because Prabhupada wasn't very well that day. And so he was meeting devotees from his bed, which was in his quarters at the Bhaktivedanta Manor upstairs. And I just remember the scene was set. Prabhupada was sitting on his bed with many pillows behind him. There was all white covers, and it was like Prabhupada was riding a swan. He was like his bed was, you know, his palanquin, or he was on the back of a swan, you know, with all the white. And George came in, and I witnessed Prabhupada telling George, and George sat on the floor. And Prabhupada said, "No, no, sit on the chair," Prabhupada's chair. And George said, "No, no, no." And Prabhupada said, "Sit on the chair," with a more firm voice. And Prabhupada and George obeyed and sat on that little white chair that's in the corner in Srila Prabhupada's bedroom at this time. And then Prabhupada asked us to bring prasad to serve George, and I think Brahmananda was there, and Jaitirtha and some of the other senior devotees. Prabhupada instructed us from the bed to put the sheets out and to make that just in front of the windows, so then put all the plates out and serve lunch. And Prabhupada just again had a drink. He wasn't eating from in the bed, but he just had his drink, little fingers up in the air. And so we served, and Prabhupada was having a lively conversation with George and with all the devotees. And I wasn't a party to the conversation because we were in service at that time, but it was seeing Srila Prabhupada's magnanimity again, and his, you know, he wasn't feeling well, but he was still from his bed preaching. Just like at the end, from his last breath, he was preaching. So another lesson is that, you know, I don't feel I'm going to have the day off. No days off. And another thing is, what I witnessed was Srila Prabhupada's affection for George, which was really tangible and present, you know, in the way he, you know, ordered him to sit in his chair, and, you know, you don't sit in the Guru's chair, you know. But George surrendered, you know, because Prabhupada was so loving and forceful, you know, and didn't want him, you know, he came and sat on the floor for prasad, but, you know, and so that was another thing. Another time when I didn't have the personal exchange with Srila Prabhupada other than make the samosas for George. And he wanted samosas, he wanted tomato chutney, and strawberry nectar. That was Prabhupada's order. Fulfilled. Thank you, Srila Prabhupada. So that's that story. In 76 or 77, I don't know, it was one of the visits. No, I think I was in 76. Prabhupada came, I was cleaning his quarters, and Prabhupada came back early, and I didn't know that. And I was racing in Bhaktivedanta Manor, I was racing in the door with 2 vases in my hand to get him on the altar. Not the altar, but Prabhupada's desk. And I looked up, and he was chanting Gayatri Mantra. And I just went, oh my gosh. And he looked at me, and with his head, he gave me permission to enter and put the vases down. And offer my obeisances and leave. So again, where fools rush in. But Prabhupada, in his kindness, just saw that, he was a little early, and he invited me with the nod of his head to offer my vases and leave. So that was really, I remember that. The lesson I got from that is, everything, is planned out, everything is timely. And Prabhupada came back early, but maybe I was late, What is time? And Srila Prabhupada taught me at that moment, and I was racing in to get done before Prabhupada got back, and I got caught. And Prabhupada's, just everything's okay. Just calm down. Do your service. Permission granted. Go. So that was, it was that pause moment, which is very important in our spiritual life, to have moments when we hit the pause button and reflect and just calm down and then be present to the moment. Yeah. And that was being present to the moment and not in fear, like a rabbit in front of the car lights, but it was, no, take a deep breath and listen, wait for permission, act, and retreat. The lesson. Remember, what was his name? Krishna Kanta, who did the...
Krishna Kanti.
Kanti. They were doing a recording of Srila Prabhupada, Golden Avatar, studios. And so everybody wanted to be part of it. And Jai Chaitanya loved to sing. But he wasn't a madanga player, and sometimes, and I remember he came home quite mortified once because he was praying the kartals during the recording, and Prabhupada told him to stop because he was off beat. And Prabhupada was so musically in tune that everything, fit together. And if there was something like a little scratching in the background or a little offbeat, then Prabhupada actually chastised. And I remember he came home and he was mortified because Prabhupada told him to stop playing the kartals, because he was offbeat. And gave somebody else the kartals to play. But he stayed in there. But it was just like, but Prabhupada did it as a teaching. By the grace of Srila Prabhupada only, in 1975, Srila Prabhupada instructed my husband to bring me to India for the opening of the Krishna Balaram temple for Janmashtami. In the end, as we know, it didn't open then, but Prabhupada told Jai Tirtha, bring your wife. Shock. And so, by Srila Prabhupada's grace, Prabhupada was leaving LA, and we all were traveling together. Now, there were 2 different flights. Pradyumna and Jai Tirtha and I were on one flight, and Srila Prabhupada and Shuddhakirti, and I think it might have been Nitai, one others were on another flight. So we went to Delhi, and we got there. Our flight got in just a little bit before Srila Prabhupada's flight. And we got to remember the old temple in Delhi, Tejas's temple, Tadamol Lane. Tadamol Lane? Or it was a tiny little temple. And Tejas and Madeira. And Madeira invited me. There were no women there. And Srila Prabhupada's quarters were Tejas's office, I think, right off the kitchen. And so Madeira invited me to help her cook. And so we were making Srila Prabhupada's lunch, and he came in, took shower, and then the whole time we were cooking, he was playing the harmonium. All the songs of Narottam Das Thakur and Bhaktivinoda Thakur and Krishnadas Kavira. He was just singing the whole time, the whole 2 hours we cooked. And it was like Prabhupada was doing his bhajan. He was doing his spiritual practice. He was home in Mother India, and he was just glorifying the masters. And I'll never forget that, just cooking and not having a tape on or a cassette or a record player in the background, but actually your spiritual master singing to Krishna and to Mahaprabhu the glories of the Goswamis, the glories of Krishna consciousness. And that was a huge gift. And I'll never forget that moment. When Prabhupada came in 1977, and he came to Bhaktivedanta Manor as his last place of coming out of India, and it was such a challenging time, because Prabhupada was so unwell, and he was so weak. And when he came, and Jaitirtha, everyone met him, and they took him upstairs in the palanquin. And then when he got out of the palanquin, he stood up, and he hugged Jaitirtha, and tears were running down his eyes. And he said, "I have come for your Tirtha." And they were both sobbing. And Prabhupada could see the future. Prabhupada could see that, that there were challenges ahead. But Prabhupada had so much love and kindness and mercy and affection that he came and he hugged Jaitirtha and he cried in his arms. That is, and what everybody says, he had a breakdown, whatever happened to him. It was a huge part of the drama, like the Mahabharata, nothing goes smoothly. But he did love Srila Prabhupada, even though at the end he was a broken man, maybe. And maybe you shouldn't cut that out. But he did have, his mental challenges and his physical challenges. He was 29 years old when he became a guru. The day after his 29th birthday, Prabhupada left. And these are just young children trying to be honorable and follow a giant. The Shaktavesh avatar of Nityananda Prabhu. Yeah? So, I was consciously looking for a guru before I met Srila Prabhupada. So I have studied many traditions. And I knew that there was a reason for human incarnation. And so I was on the road looking. And what attracted me to Srila Prabhupada, at first, I thought the Krishna devotees were quite out there. I was, I did the Woodstock thing and everything, but Krishna devotees were really strict. And I thought, actually, as I became attracted I loved the singing of Srila Prabhupada. I loved, actually, the fact that he had clear boundaries with his disciples, and he set clear boundaries for devotees to live in community. And I thought that was really noble. I think I liked the idea, and I felt attracted to Srila Prabhupada because there was a whole package. It wasn't just do your own thing and it's an add-on. It was actually, he invited us to love God. He invited us to do this process and follow his example. And he lived it. So by following his example and by dedicating ourselves to the quest, who is Krishna? Who is Guru? I don't know who Guru is. I don't know who Krishna is. But he was a mystical, affectionate, wise teacher who, for me, I felt had my best interest at heart. He was noble in how he related with the devotees, and he was a warrior, and sometimes too much. I thought, oh my God, the way you do, But he actually had a very short window to do an amazing piece of work. And Srila Prabhupada, he met his spiritual master in, 1923 or 22, something early. And he was my age. He was 70 when he actually started doing the work. And, I just think, oh gosh, I'm 70, and how can I have the energy to do? And that's because Srila Prabhupada, I firmly believe, was empowered by Lord Krishna and by the lineage of Mahaprabhu, by Srila Bhaktisiddhanta, to be the one to bring this grace to the Western countries and to touch us in a way that is miraculous, really. And he didn't tell us to give up. He said, he didn't say give up this, give up that. He said, include Krishna. So in the beginning, it was very, strict. I mean, it was always very strict, but, we just did. And then as we got older, he just encouraged us, and he does encourage us every day. And that's the message of Srila Prabhupada as well, is that his presence isn't just his physical presence. Every day we sit down and we chant our japa, Prabhupada's presence is there. Every day we open a book and read a sloka, our heads bow in gratitude and presence, because Prabhupada is our ever well-wisher. He signed our letters like that, your ever well-wisher, and he's our true ever well-wisher. So as opposed, I don't know other gurus, I know him. And I'm not comparing teachers, because everybody comes, and Guru is one. Srila Prabhupada told us, so many people can come and help us along the way, shikshas. And that is, I believe, Srila Prabhupada helping us. Okay? Jai Anilo Premadana Karuna Prachu